Hi there, it's Melody Brooke again. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I have a very busy day today. I had a psychodrama group this morning and going to do another one this evening. So in between times I had to drive here and get ready to see you guys. So sorry I'm running late. So today I wanted to talk to you about loneliness because that is something not only I'm dealing with, I think a lot of us are dealing with, and it's not something that we often freely talk about. We might talk about depression, we might talk about anxiety, we might talk about grief or loneliness or despair, but we seldom really talk about loneliness. It's almost like that is something that we are embarrassed to admit to, and yet I think that it is a huge problem, especially in today's world where more and more of us are feeling isolated and cut off from our families, from our friends, from our communities in so many ways. You know, a lot of us are mobile and move a lot. Hi, Larry. It's good to see you. You know, we get cut off from our sense of family going through divorces. We get cut off from our sense of family, from our family moving around. I mean, I have a daughter that lives in Berlin, and I have one that lives in Denver, and I have one that lives here who's getting ready to move to Denver. So it would be very easy to feel isolated from my family, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who's going through that. And there's also just the additional sense of being alone even when you're with people. So there's a lot of aspects to loneliness that I think I think there's a lot of shame associated with the idea of being lonely. You know, it's one thing to be alone. Hi, Christy. It's another thing to experience and understand that really big sense of loneliness that I think all of us experience at some time or another. Hi, Gail. I'm glad to have you on. So loneliness is, I think I want to define it as a feeling of being separate, a feeling, hi John, a feeling of not being a part of some group or affiliate group, or there's lots of ways and places where we might feel lonely, even when we're in a crowd of people. Sometimes I think we feel lonely if we don't feel like other people understand our experience. Hi, Alan. I think loneliness is something that I think everyone has experienced from time to time. I think it is largely the thing that drives addictions. I think that's pretty much, I mean, you can validate that by looking at the literature on addictions, that largely that's about loneliness. A sense of disconnection, a sense of disconnection from other people. Hi, Carlos, and our community. And loneliness is also, I think, largely what people experience when they're suicidal. So those are some of the feelings that drive those very terrible behaviors. In fact, it's interesting that a lot of the things that we think of as being risks to our health, like heart disease, like smoking, like risky behaviors, all of those things have a pretty high risk of mortality, right? So hi, Kimberly. But loneliness, apparently, from what the research has shown, is it raises it decreases our mortality by 45%. 45%. I don't think there's any other risk factor for mortality that's greater than loneliness is, and yet we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it as a reality, and yet it is very much a reality because it is what drives so many of these things that cause us to end up, killing ourselves. Suicidality, addictions, which is a kind of passive suicide that happens, right? So understanding that loneliness is such a huge part of what we as humans experience and what prevents us from being able to feel okay in the world, I think it's an important thing for us to start talking about. And I am concerned that we're not talking about it. Hi, Robert. Love to have your insights on this, Robert. Robert is a PhD psychologist, LPC, and I would just love to hear what you think about that. So from my perspective, loneliness is something that we experience when we experience ourselves as being different from, hi Steve, and separate from other people. And sometimes it's when we also experience ourselves as being maybe not as good as other people. It's something that maybe we feel ashamed of, or certainly that we don't feel like we can share with other people. Hi, Bonnie. So when we feel those feelings that we are separate, that we are different, that we are somehow maybe less than or disconnected, when we have things that we have, hi Teresa, that we have a difficult time talking to other people about, that pushes us into a corner of loneliness if we don't feel like we can discuss something that's intimate to our daily lives. There are people, I think, that are feeling more and more isolated in this very politically, what's the word I'm looking for, separate sort of, separate corners, dichotomized way of looking at what's happening politically and socially today. People begin to feel really isolated when they have a point of view that doesn't match whatever group they're in. Hi, Chris. So if you are, perhaps you are in many, many ways, you are very, very conservative. Maybe you believe in right to life, you believe in people's right to bear arms, you believe in people being able to have freedom of speech and saying what they want to say and not worry about political correctness. But you also believe that people should be allowed to express themselves in whatever sexual way they want. That would be a problem, perhaps, with many of the people who are in that part of the political spectrum, right? So then you end up feeling very isolated and very alone. Or perhaps you are a very liberal person in many ways, and you believe in people's right to choose, and you believe in people's right to live in whatever sexual expression that they might have, be it gay or lesbian or transgender or not non-binary or whatever that we are, and that's okay, and that you believe and support that. But at the same time, you are in complete agreement with the people's right to bear arms and to have complete access to whatever weapons you want, right? So that puts you into a place where you might feel isolated from the community which you feel connected to. So you're having to hold on to this truth that your community doesn't agree with, which that can put you into a place of feeling lonely because you're in a point of view that your community doesn't support at large. So those things can contribute to that feeling of loneliness. The other thing that can contribute to a sense of loneliness is if you're carrying childhood shame for any reason. A lot of us have maybe some horrific traumas from our childhood, and we believe that perhaps that there was something wrong with us that caused us to be abused that way. Maybe we don't think it logically, but there's an emotional sense that we are not quite as good as the people around us, and that leaves us often with a sense of being separate from people even when we're in the same room with them. Another thing that can cause us to feel lonely is if we're going through a hard time and everybody around us is seeming like their world is wonderful. And I think that's, of course, one of the more talked about topics in social media is that when you're looking on social media and you're seeing people posting these pictures of being in the Swiss islands, or they're living in some mansion or traveling all over the place, and they have the picture of their happy family, and you don't have any of those things. You're not having those opportunities. You're not experiencing that kind of daily sense of prosperity maybe that it seems like everybody around you is experiencing, and so you feel isolated and lonely because what about me? I'm not experiencing life that way. And I think this is one of the things that we have to start talking to our children about, because I think it is a distortion of reality, right? It's not reality, because everyone, no matter how glamorous they may look on the outside, has things that they're dealing with. It's like Yvonne Crum, one of my lovely Facebook friends, talks about everybody's dealing with something. And when we start to believe that we're alone in our suffering, that we are the only ones dealing with whatever it is that it feels like we are dealing with by ourselves, then we start to feel more isolated and alone. So one of the things that I love about group therapy, which I haven't had an opportunity to practice in a very long time and would love to do, but I find it's more and more difficult to pin people down to specific meeting times, so I find that hard. But that ability to get with other people and have those heart-to-heart discussions where you start speaking your truths, where you talk about what your actual experience is, instead of putting on a personal brand like a lot of us feel like we have to do on social media, because you're not going to spill your beans about all your heartbreak on social media. That's not appropriate either. But at the same time, when we are living our lives, we end up judging our insides from everybody else's outsides, which makes us feel more lonely. So, Alan, I'm going to read what you said. I have no money and have no regular contact with people, but I'm not lonely. That's lovely, and I'd love to hear your comments about how you managed to do that, because I think a lot of us don't know how to do that, and that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, is how we accomplish that. Oh, hi, Jim. Welcome. I'm trying to say hi. There we go. So one of the ways that we can manage that loneliness is to first off acknowledge that we feel it, because I think it's normal to feel it, and it's not something that we acknowledge as being normal. I think it's very normal for us to go through periods of time, maybe even just throughout the course of a day, where we might feel lonely at some point. If you have recently gone through a breakup or a divorce, or your family, or you've moved away from your family, and if you're changing jobs sometimes. Hi, Pat. There's a lot of ways in which we can be triggered into feelings of loneliness, even when maybe there's a lot of ways in which our life is working very well. So recognizing that it's normal and natural to feel it and be open to talking about it is one of the big things that you can do to help remediate that sense of loneliness. To be willing to go out and say, you know what? I haven't talked to a single soul for the last 3 days, and I feel so separated, isolated, and lonely. There are some people that can go a week without ever talking to anybody and be perfectly okay with that. But there are other people who, to do that for 3 days is like torture. It's like being in some kind of living hell. So recognize and acknowledge that it's okay for you to feel that it's normal and natural to struggle with that from time to time. And then find some people, do your best to reach out to people. And that can be really scary, because we live so much sometimes in fear of judgment that we struggle to be willing to reach out and say, hey, you know what, I'm feeling disconnected. That might be actually a safer thing to say than I'm lonely, but just say I'm feeling disconnected, to own that truth with somebody who maybe you feel it could be a safe person to say that to. And and if you get a negative reaction, if you get no reaction, don't take that personally, because everybody has their own stuff. Everybody has their own stuff that they're into, their own issues. It's not about you. And I think that's one of the risks that we take when we're willing to try to step out of that loneliness, when we're trying to step out of that sense of disconnection. Hi, Katrina. Is to risk allowing somebody else to see into us. and it's the ability to let somebody see into us that allows us to feel connected, and there's a huge risk sometimes. Okay, what does Christy say in here? I thought I was going to love working from home and never seeing anyone because I'm such an introvert. It's harder than I thought it would be. I do get lonely sometimes. Yeah, Christy, I understand that completely because when I'm not seeing clients, I'm largely alone doing my other kinds of works that I do. So I totally understand that. When we spend a lot of hours without connecting with other people, even when we're introverted, we can end up feeling pretty isolated and pretty lonely. And the trick is to find ways, what else do you say? Okay. Especially in a new city where you don't know many people. When we go to the bank, I talk their ears off. Well, I know exactly how you feel because I sit one-on-one and I'm mostly listening, right, while I'm doing my counseling sessions. Not that I'm always quiet, but I'm certainly not talking about my stuff or what's going on with me. So I'm like you. When I do get around people, I'm like talking their ear off, which maybe is part of why I do these 4-at-4s, because it gives me an opportunity to talk and connect with you guys, which I really appreciate being able to do. But one of the challenges for me is to find people who I connect with creatively and professionally. That's a really big thing for me, and I think that can be a way in which we can feel isolated and lonely also, is to find people who are sort of our tribe. And it's not easy to do, but it's worth the effort, right? So it's being willing to step forth. And Christy, one of the things that I talked to some of my clients about doing is being willing to step out into some new areas, go to a church or some kind of spiritual community where there's people who maybe think and feel like you do. Find a meetup group of people who maybe share some interests with you, and be willing to go and just meet new people. That for an introvert, I know that can be really terrifying, but you have to also have boundaries in order to make that safe, right? So the boundaries being that you perhaps say, okay, I'm willing to go from this time to this time, and I will talk to this many people, and I will not take their phone numbers unless I really feel like that's somebody that I'm definitely going to want to talk to. Just do some things that help you feel safe within that context. But it is important to us as individuals because the truth is we are social people. Human beings are social animals. We need other people. We are not islands, as the poem says. We are people who need people, as the song says. So it's the truth. We need to reach out. We need to connect. We need to allow ourselves to connect intimately with other people, and not just chit chat and socialize like you do at the bank. That does help some, absolutely, but there's a deeper level of loneliness that we will run the risk of getting into if we don't allow ourselves to have those deeper connections. And one of the things lovely about this period of time is that we do have this ability to video chat with people. So even if we can't get in their in-person connections, we can reach out to them in video chats and FaceTimes and Skypes and Google Hangouts or whatever, so that we can have face-to-face connections with people, even if we can't be in the same room with them, which is absolutely fantastic. I see this with my daughters, who are able to stay connected to all of their high school friends, which wasn't true for me growing up, because once you left school, you might not see those people again for 20 or 30 years. Today does offer opportunities for connection through technology, but we have to use it that way, because just using social media to connect, that may give you some sense of connection, but it doesn't give you that. It can increase your sense of isolation and loneliness if you don't actually reach out. Maybe I do have some Facebook friends who I have met with just through video chat, and then ended up meeting in person, and that's a definite possibility of a way to make connections. So we have to be willing to risk a little bit in order to not stay stuck in our loneliness. And it's kind of going back to understanding that when we're in that loneliness space, we're kind of stuck in that victim place where we feel powerless and like other people have all the control, and we've lost our sense of that. And when we're stuck in that place, it's horrible. And finding a way out, we have to take ownership of. That's what pulls us out of that victim place and that loneliness horror, is to take ownership of it and go, you know what? I don't like feeling this way, so I'm going to do what I can to change that for myself, because I am responsible for myself and what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. Nobody else is. So when we can take ownership of that and do step out and allow ourselves to be exposed a little bit, and be conscious of how we feel, be mindful of what's happening in our bodies when we open up to people, to get the feedback from our higher self as to whether or not this is a person we want to continue to deepen that relationship with. Because we do have that capacity within our bodies to sense, to know from that higher place who is safe, who isn't, who lights us up, and who maybe just doesn't feel a deep connection with. But we have to be centered in our mindfulness to do that. And Christy, so that's one of the things that you can do, because you have that delightful mindfulness practice that you have, is to be able to rely on that when you meet other people, and trust that gut about who's safe, who isn't, who I want to expose a little bit more of myself with. Take the risk to get yourself out there. We don't have to stay stuck in our loneliness. If you sense that someone else is lonely, talk to them about what they're going through, and that sometimes when you're in a group of people, you can kind of see the person who's maybe a little bit shy, a little bit introverted, and struggling to connect. That might be a person who's also trying to find a new way to connect, and reach out to them and just test the waters a little bit, but take ownership of your own emotional experience. We get trapped in that suicidal thinking when we don't do that. So it's really important for us to take ownership of our emotional state and be willing to take that risk. And even if it's scary, a little bit or even a lot, to step out of our comfort zone and take ownership of our own emotional life. So I appreciate you guys hanging in here with me. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts? I can tell you that for myself, my struggle has been to find, like I said, my tribe, my sense of people who can identify with me, because I'm not your normal person. I am both a counselor, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, and I'm a filmmaker, and I'm an actor. I'm all of these things, and it's hard to find people who can sort of gel with all those different parts of me. I think they're out there. I've met some of them, and as a matter of fact, I took a risk, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, where I was a driver for a local film festival, Women in Texas Film Festival, and I met some of the filmmakers, and the surprising thing was one of the women that I met, that I drove to the airport, ended up being someone who was an author and a therapist of sorts from California. Hi, Jonathan, missed you today. Jonathan is in my psychodrama training group, and we didn't get to see it. I didn't get to see you today. And so finding people who you connect with in that way sometimes can come in surprising ways, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there, which is what I was doing with the driving for the film festival. And this woman was just lovely, and she offered some insight into a couple that I actually am seeing right now, and it was lovely. And the more connections I have like that, the happier a person I'm going to be. But in order to do that, I can't do that just, going to work and coming home every day. I have to get out there, I have to put myself out there in maybe some areas where I'm going to have the opportunity to meet people who could possibly be my tribe. So when you're out putting yourself out there, go into those areas, go to those meetup groups, go to those organizations that are doing things that light your fire. And that not everybody you meet in those places is going to be someone that you can relate with, that will actually, turn out to be your person or persons and the truth is, we don't need that many people. It's not like we need hundreds of people who we can connect with, but we do need a group of 5 to 10 people that we go and we can open our hearts to and be authentic. And I think that's when we start feeling lonely, is when we cannot find a way to be authentic with anyone. And when we work in the corporate world, like a lot of you guys do, you're around people all day long where you have to put on this image, and you don't have an opportunity to be fully authentic. And when we are not fully authentic, it's like we're suppressing part of ourself, and that part of ourself starts to feel isolated, starts to feel less than or separate from other people. And when we get into, hi Katrina, now I have seen today, it's good to see you again. So finding those people who you can really reach out to. Hi Cindy, I love seeing you guys here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Katrina says, you're fabulous. Thank you, you're so sweet. Katrina is my awesome psychodrama teacher. She teaches psychodrama to me and a bunch of other people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She's amazing. Highly recommend her. So check her out sometime. Cindy says, good to see you and hear your voice. Yes, Cindy, I know. It's been ages. It's been probably 10 years since I've seen you. So this is what I'm saying. Put yourself out there, which is part of what I'm doing here today, is trying to be willing to put myself out there. And I want to say that I am looking to find people who are leaders, who are creators, who are functioning at a high level in terms of the message that you're trying to do out in the world. I'm looking to connect with more people like that in my life. And so if you are that, please reach out to me, because I need more people like that in my life. I've been listening to this amazing book called Braving the Wilderness, which I really, really adore. It's Brene Brown. Of course, I love everything she does. But this particular book addresses some things that I have been struggling with lately, which is how to be authentic and still find connection. Because a lot of times when we are really authentic, it turns people off. People don't like that. They don't like what you're saying. They don't agree with you, so they reject you. And that's kind of the world that we're in right now, right? If you say an opinion, suddenly you become the bad guy. Let's see, Kimberly says, I feel safety is a big factor for most people. Absolutely, safety is a huge factor for most people. Because if you don't feel safe with someone, you're not going to let your guard down. You're not going to let yourself be authentic, because that's not a safe person, and you're going to feel isolated and separate from them. And when we feel isolated and separate and lonely, we can't reach out to people who don't feel safe. So you have to, but you can't know if they're for sure that person isn't safe unless two things. One is you're mindful enough to pay attention to what your body's telling you. And number two, you're willing to put yourself out there a little bit to see how that person responds, and let your gut tell you if that feels okay or not. So that's part of our challenge, is risking being fully authentic and knowing that there are going to be people who are not going to accept that you. There are people who are seriously going to be reactive to you. In fact, the truth is, if you're not getting those reactions from people, you're probably not being fully authentic, and you probably are experiencing loneliness because you are not speaking your truth. And when you don't speak your truth, there's a quote from Maya Angelou in the Braving the Wilderness book that I'm reading, when she talks about, I'm not going to remember the quote, but it has to do with that we have no place that we belong, and we belong everywhere, which I love that, because the idea being that we do belong everywhere. We are part of each other. We are all connected. We are all part of the human race. We do fully, hi Rob, we do fully connect with, we are all of us part of the same humanness on the planet. But at the same time, we are unique and very special individuals, and so we are both. We both don't belong and do belong at the same time, which is an incredible idea to sort of integrate into your being. because when you can do that, it helps you recognize that you really are never totally alone, no matter how lonely you might feel. We are always connected. And that's a piece that I've had to struggle with, is recognizing that, yes, I am different from most people. Yes, I don't think there's anybody, well, there's probably nobody like any of us, but I'm particularly unique. I just had a personality profile done, and the tester said, I've never seen results like this before, which I found hilarious. But it certainly explains a lot of how I feel so much of the time, because I do struggle to find people who can sort of gel with me in lots of different ways. So anyway, thank you so much for being here today, and please put your comments below, any thoughts that you have, any experiences you might have with this, and if you're interested, you can follow me on Patreon. I'm trying to build up a following there, and building a way where you can interact with me more deeply than just these weekly video chats. So check it out, patreon.com. I think it's /MelodyBrooke, so you can find me pretty easily. You can also follow more of these videos, probably follow them more easily on my Melody Brooke LPC LMFT page on Facebook, and you can also follow me on YouTube, which I sometimes will put these on YouTube as well. But anyway, I will be here next Monday at 4, and I'll be Thursday with the 4 at 4, and I will see you then. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.